Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, snowed in, as always, at this time of year. And welcome to the podcast, a returning guest, returning champion, I should say, Alasdair Stuart. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Since we last chatted, my brain chemistry has improved dramatically. Let me put it that way.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, you may not notice because I always get a boost when I'm talking to people, but, it's so much easier to live with a brain that isn't constantly trying to get me to do horrible things to my own thought process, just like to put me down and stuff,
Okay,
it's never been as serious as like, suicidal tendencies or anything, but I don't know why I'm saying that. That definitely hasn't been, but it's more like I just hated being me for a long time, and it's finally, I'm coming out of it. It's great.
That is the best news I've had all week. That's really cool, dude. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That thing that where something will sit at the back of your brain and go, yeah, I'm going to tell you awful stuff that isn't true, even though you know it isn't true. The simple fact that you go, no, that's not true, is a percentage of energy, and that's energy you can't put somewhere else. And after a while, that's just exhausting.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I mean that's how I tend to experience depression, even when I still have a wave of it. It's always, I just don't want to do anything. I'm low on energy because I don't feel bad necessarily. I just feel like blah. I'm not doing that.
Yep.
And that's kind of the healthier, when you're in a healthier mode. That's what depression feels like. So it's still worth getting help with, because that's a serious problem. It's just not as acute as somebody who's actually in a hole, and can't seem to get out of it in the same way.
Oh yeah. And in fact, there's kind of the kernel at the center of that is something which I've spent a lot of time dealing with this year, which is if you have like a small problem which is inconveniencing you, but you're dealing with it, that's fine. When you have 5 of those, you don't have a small problem. You have a large problem wearing 5 disguises, and you are ridiculous amounts of energy being all right with the fact you have those problems instead of solving them. And a lot of my year has been, here are these 5 small problems. I'm so tired. I've solved them. I'm noticeably less tired.
Yeah, definitely. And we are having a little bit of a network problem here, the Shane Niederreiter. So I am just gonna, whatever. Never mind that. It's all good. But just had to tune down some of the specs, let me say, on this communication. So, yeah, no, but it makes so much sense. It's like you can't, one problem is one thing. 5 problems is not 5 separate things, because you are one person. You have to deal with all that stuff.
Absolutely. And this, speaking from personal experience, this is the really insidious thing, because that confidence issues, and I would argue that there is probably no creator on earth that doesn't have confidence issues, get you the way that you never expect them to. It's not all the time the voice going, you suck, it should be destroyed. It's, yeah, that's inconveniencing you, but it's just you. So deal with it. Yeah. Just live around it. And don't do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. my biggest improvement this past year, I think, has been the realization that actually I am pretty good at writing fiction, and as long as I put the work in, and I write the book and then edit the book effectively, which is just a matter of time, really. And not even that much time. That's the thing. I'm so lazy. But I'm also a pretty quick study when it comes to writing and editing books. So I don't need a whole ton of time to write. Say, I mean, it depends on the method, but on the balance between writing and editing. Right? If I dictate, it takes a lot less time to draft, but a lot more time to edit. But if I just and so they're kind of even in my estimation currently.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
Dictation versus typing, but on the other hand, there's one thing that I always feel when I'm dictating is that I'm super confident when I'm talking, because I have so much more practice with it, even than writing. And so, and confidence is really important. I think that's the thing. And that's one thing I realized with editing is that if I run on confidence when editing, it doesn't hurt. It's not painful to edit. I don't understand how I used to be now. Like where I'm like, oh, if I look at a piece of a story, well, now I do understand why I used to be this way, because I didn't get on a very basic level what was wrong with a given moment of a story. Like I'm trying to fix a paragraph, and if something's wrong, And so I don't know, but I can't figure it out. And now I'm like, oh, I've been doing this for 18 years. I've seen this before. It's almost all familiar at this point.
I've been down this road before. Yeah,
exactly.
That's such a nice feeling when you get there as well. That moment where you suddenly go, no, wait, this thing which I've taken for granted and assume everyone can do easily, very few people can do easily. Mm-hmm. And this is what I'm highly skilled at.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird feeling for me. I mean, I've never had that feeling so common since like the last 6 months. Basically, it's like, oh yeah, I can just do that.
That's brilliant, dude.
I can go back and fix things that I didn't think were possible to fix before. I'm like, my first. This actually is on topic for books. When I look at the first novel I ever published, actually, as an independent publisher, which has been pulled down because it was pretty bad. It had a rough time of it. And by bad, I don't mean like the story was fine, except for the fact that I didn't deliver any information that readers needed before the action began. And so I'm like, oh, nobody gets this story at all. I need to go back and fix it. And that's why I'd pulled it down along with the sequel. Because even though the sequel's a perfectly functional book, I'd figured most of this stuff out writing the first book, but I didn't fix it in the first book, if you know what I mean, in my process. Yeah. So it's like, but I'm publishing these on the first book on Kindle Vella, and I'm getting feedback. I'm like, well, people are like, oh, this is great. I can't wait for the next chapter. I'm like, oh, well, okay, it's working. I had to re-edit it, but it's working now. And that's a real surprise to me, actually, in a way.
And a very pleasant one. And also, the other thing which... And I've talked to a lot of people about this, about the concept of positive feedback this year. And I say this as much on my behalf as anybody else's. When someone tells you that they really like something you do, they're not lying.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very... it sounds tautological, but it makes sense. But it's so important. And it's something people always forget, or often forget.
I literally had this earlier today. I had a very, very kind listener who linked to the most recent Escape Pod, and I was a guest host for it, who said, come for the story, because the story's great and really smart and does some interesting things, and stay for the eloquent and lyrical outro from Alasdair Stuart. And my first response was, I remember that one. I thought it was rubbish. And then I immediately went, no, that was all right. And if someone else liked it, then obviously it was good. And that we're trained as creatives, and I mean, this is before we went on air. This is something that we actually touched on by talking about Matt Wallace, and Matt Wallace talks about this an awful lot. We're trained as creatives to believe everything negative that's said about us and nothing positive, because we are fundamentally devalued. And I mean, if you wanted me to pull in a real world example, I could tell you the film industry in this country brings in somewhere in the region of £20.6 billion a year. The fisheries industry brings in 1.2. We are not currently members of the European Economic Union because the government lied to enough fishermen to convince them to vote against it, and in doing so has functionally annihilated motion picture production in this country.
Oof. Yeah.
So the economic shift of this £1.2 billion is a literal 20th of this one, but the £20 billion is brought in by people who don't vote for us. So fuck them, is a kind of a very, very visceral example of how creatives are devalued. So when someone says something nice, it's you know, the old line of when someone shows you who they are, believe them. When someone says something nice about your work, believe them. They mean it.
Absolutely. I mean, I was so. It was actually. It was also. I mean, this year I actually got my first quote. And I was on a Kickstarter campaign. I quoted a book for
Nice.
J. Daniel Sawyer. It was just not. I read it in advance, of course. It was his nonfiction book about Robert A. Heinlein. And so I gave him a quote, and he used it in the ad. I'm like, but then he referred to me as an acclaimed science fiction writer or something. I forget exactly how
you.
It's a little weird. I don't. I mean, I talk to people on here who have like won awards and stuff a lot of the time, and I'm like, I don't have that kind of thing going on. But then but when I took it up with Dan, and this is just me patting myself on the back because I was surprised. I'm like, maybe you want to change that. I know you already recorded this commercial, but you maybe want to change it. And I'm like, and he's like, no, it's exactly as it should be. I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, I guess I'll accept that, but. It took a while to adjust to what people were saying, to him saying, like,
yeah.
I think his exact words were something like, you know, people, you may not have a lot of readers, not as many as you want anyway, but the ones who read your books like them, and they're vocal about it, which is fascinating. I guess I hadn't heard from them.
Enough people talking about your stuff will turn the world. That's just how it is.
Yes.
And of course, the 3-4 steps out from that are, make sure people are talking, people are talking about your stuff for good reasons, and they are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're an acclaimed writer.
I guess so. Anyway, enough about me. What have you been up to this year, Al? I mean, geez, this is not much of an interview. Even less so than usual.
It has been a busy year. There's been all sorts of stuff going on. From a personal point of view, there are a couple of kind of mid-level help. This is what I was talking about with the 5. If you have 5 minor problems, you have a big problem in 5 disguises. A couple of minor health problems, which I was actually finally brave enough to look at the top of this year, and I'm very pleased to say that they're all in the process of correcting or being corrected.
Yeah.
Without going into detail, it's nothing squicky, it's nothing life-threatening, it's nothing frightening, but all of them were consequences of the last 2 years, because everyone deals with a pandemic differently, and I dealt with it by not moving very much and rarely leaving the house. That has real physical consequences. You just gotta trust. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, if you talked to me in January, I would have sounded like this, but the confidence would have been much, much thinner, because most of me was panic. Because, I was thinking, I have no energy, I'm not sleeping well, this is my life now. And
I've been there.
12 months further on, the one I will talk about is I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. Which makes a ton of sense. And I was given a CPAP machine. And this has become very useful on 2 levels. The immediate biological one is instead of 45 minutes wake up, 45 minutes wake up, I sleep between 5 and 7 hours every single day. And I rarely, if ever, wake up. And the second is it's been a really useful kind of compass point, because 2 years ago, when we began discussing the possibility I might have sleep apnea, the idea of a machine horrified me. Falling asleep with a mask on my face? Are you fucking kidding me? That sounds awful. Yeah. That sounds like... And of course, the awful part of your brain that has no filter goes, that's what old people who are almost dead have. And evolving that over time, I'm now at the point where, my we call it my sleep bot. It's covered in stickers of R2-D2. It is my chirpy little buddy that helps me sleep at night. And the difference is visceral.
Oh, no, I understand. Yeah.
It is absolutely visceral. I didn't have the kind of Disney princess moment, which I know a lot of people have had when they start using a CPAP machine for the first time, where they wake up the next morning, throw the curtains to one side and go, "Good morning!"
Start singing.
Right. But what I did have was the sudden realization that the top 15% of my brain had the lights back on.
Yeah. No, 100%. That's like it was when I got my CPAP back in 2019 as well. Yeah.
It's such a fucking cool feeling, isn't it? It's like, oh shit, there I am.
Yeah, wait, I was here all along. It's crazy. Yeah, exactly. The lights were out, and now we turned it on. Wait, this house is bigger than I thought.
Yeah, look at all the space. It's great.
Yeah.
So that's helped immensely, and it's been really, it's very well timed, because there's been an awful lot on this year. I have a novella coming out at the top of January. I'm going to err on the side of caution and say I can't quite talk about what it is yet.
Secret novella.
Case. But I do have one coming out. And I'm also in the middle of re-editing the novel to send out to agents.
Okay.
And that's been a good chunk of the last couple of months. On top of all of that, the RPG that I spent the last couple of years co-creating with Jason Peter over at Genesis of Legend Publishing after the war has been trundling along quite nicely. It's never broken the bank, and I can kind of see why, because it sounds very arrogant to talk about one of your projects ago, but it deals with very big concepts. But it's a game about mimetic horror and community building in a semi-post-apocalyptic galaxy, and I love it. I love our weird little murder baby, and Jason does too. And he's been assembling across the course of this year the last supplement for it, which is basically 2 other time periods to run the game in,
cool.
A bunch of extra character classes, kits to convert it over to the 5 or 6 kind of default SF RPGs which are running now. And I've been helping out on that, and I'm most of the way through the words for that. And there's also the Full Edge, which is my weekly pop culture newsletter. We're putting together the Bring a Toy from Home edition, we're calling it, for the 17th, because that is not going to be remotely sensible. That's just going to be, here are 25 videos that have made me laugh and 200 words about Ghostbusters. Go. Have a good Christmas, everybody.
Oh, fucking A. That sounds great, actually.
Look, thank you. That's tomorrow.
I mean, I like your newsletter most of the time, but that sounds awesome, even more than usual.
So yeah, there's been an awful lot on. There's a couple of big projects which are oh yeah, that's the other one. We released our first ever full cast audio drama.
Oh wow, what's that one? What's that called? Yeah.
Over at Escape Artist, and this is the actual process for this was really fun, because about 7 months ago, I read a news story about how for the first time in I think about a decade, the witching hour, the point where the clocks go back, would fall on Halloween. So,
ooh, now that's a spooky Halloween, witching hour,
right? So midnight to 1 a.m. Halloween would be when the clocks went back, and I talked to Marguerite about this, and we were both like, we should do something. So we put the word out to staff, and then one of our staff came back and went, yeah, we should do a full cast audio drama. How about this? And we spent 6 months with a cast of 3 writers, with them as lead writer, me as one of the others, putting together a script, and at the same time we were liaising with 9 or 10 other horror shows, because the script was designed as kind of a showcase as well for other people, and getting stuff in from them. And then we produced it and got it out just about for Halloween. It's the first one we've ever done, and it was designed very specifically to be put out there to show some of the stuff that we need to do. Mm-hmm. And the two bits of feedback we've got are, this is great, and please fix the levels next time, which is entirely understandable, because we've got 10 discrete audio sources, probably closer to 25 if you count all the various cast members. But we did it, and it's 7,000 words long, and it's an hour, including all the introductions. And it is this gloriously weird idea. It's an episode of Pseudopod. It's an audio drama about an episode of Pseudopod, set in a version of Pseudopod where Alex is partially biomechanical and linked to the consoles. And the version of Alasdair hosting it is a witch from 2 dimensions over, who is trying to perfect the true story, the perfect story, to wake up the elder god that all the pseudopods in every dimension are pseudopods of. And the version of me in the story tries to stop her. And the other shows are, because she's constantly kind of tuning in and connecting everyone in the world to Pseudopod, the other shows are kind of signals from other universes that keep intruding. And it's so weird. It's like 25% High School Musical, 25% Alice in Wonderland, 50% Quatermass. And we had a blast. It was really cool.
No, it sounds like a lot of fun. Holy crap. It also sounds insanely meta. Very meta. But hey, for your fans, the people who are going to be listening to you on the regular, I imagine that must have been must be a real treat. I mean, come on.
We had a couple of people who were like, you got some deep cuts in here. And we were like, yes, that was the plan. And I've also been in a bunch of voice acting. Way back at the top of the year, I was approached to be in a show which launches, we're recording this on the 11th of December. It launches on the 28th. So I think by the time this episode is released,
this will be coming out like a few days before that. Yeah. It's like the day after Christmas. Yeah.
Releasing on the 28th of December is a fantastic full-cast audio drama called The Secret of St. Kilda. And it is about a isolated Scottish community on an island off the coast. The island is real, and I would heartily recommend anyone interested dig into the history surrounding it, because not only is this an area, if I've done my research right, this is an area where at some point in the relatively near past, an island had to be evacuated because a flu epidemic took the population below a level where it could be sustained.
Ooh.
This is the same area where Powell and Pressburger, who are a pair of very famous British film directors, best known for a superb film called A Matter of Life and Death, which is either an incredibly lyrical and gentle and kind depiction of the afterlife, or the world's weirdest romantic comedy, where David Niven, as a bomber pilot who is concussed when he jumps out of his plane over the English Channel, is convinced that he's being put on trial for his life by the afterlife, which is full of very proper World War II WAF officer angels and an extremely harried personal assistant of his who is a partially beheaded French revolutionary nobleman. It's a strange film. Powell and Pressburger were very good at this, about this kind of thing, and they wanted to do a movie about the flu epidemic out on these islands. So they filmed on the nearest island they could. There were no facilities. They literally had to build a small town and a processing lab and accommodation. And I know this because when I was really into their movies the first time, I found out they'd written a book about it called 400,000 Feet on Fowler, referring to how many feet of film they'd shot. And I thought, I'll bet that's in print. I'll go check it out. And the cheapest copy I found was £1,000.
Oh my God. Okay, that's a little bit much.
So Kilda is set very much in that kind of area, and like I say, I'm the narrator for that show. And I've also been cast in 2 other things very recently. We're recording a show called Rogue Maker at the moment, which is about a starliner moving between solar systems and something goes wrong.
Okay.
And the passengers and crew are evacuated. And my character on that is a guy called Malachi Tessera, who is the flight attendant and the best friend of the ship's onboard AI. And he is completely different to everyone else I've ever played. There's nothing sinister about him. There's nothing kind of evil or calculating. He's just a really lovely dude. And over on Super Suits, which won't debut until I think quite late next year, and Super Suits is a legal superhuman comedy drama about the lawyers who deal with the legal aftermath of
course,
battles.
yeah.
Yes. So, of course, both Margaret and I are in that. We auditioned. Margaret has been cast as a superhuman defense attorney who is that unique type of lawyer who's kind of, you think this is bad? I had to defend a guy the other day that threw a bus at someone's head. It was amazing.
He cleaved an eyewitness news van in twain. Yeah, as they say in Venture Brothers. Yeah.
And I am playing a former defense attorney turned kindergarten teacher who is the husband of one of the other main characters. And in a moment of metafictional genius, the likes of which we will not see again this year, I would argue, they have cast me as this guy and Ben Meredith from the Magnus Archives as his husband. And for those listeners of yours that may be unfamiliar with it, I'm best known in voice acting circles for my role on the Magnus Archives as a character called Peter Lucas. And Peter, if you ask me, was the unsung hero of the show. If you ask the writers of the show, the other cast members, the producers, and most fans, they'll tell you he was a villain. I'm right. They're not. But Peter was... There was a small but perfectly formed fan community that really locked onto Peter's character and Ben's character and decided that obviously they were terrible murder husbands. And there is this just magnificent parade of running joke fan fiction about how they just get divorced constantly.
Oh my!
Okay. This time round, canonically, Ben and I are playing actual husbands. So the fan art is going to produce itself. It's going to be amazing.
You got a lot to look forward to. We got a lot to look forward to from your voice this coming year, especially.
We thank you. We ran the numbers a little while ago, and we figured out 2022 is full, which is not something I've genuinely an experience I've never had before. Normally what happens is I come into the top of January and I'm like, okay, absolutely nothing is going to happen in every industry I work in for 8 weeks. I'm going to catch up on my reading, and
bad news for your books.
There's another one. Another one I just remembered as well. And this year I've got the novella to put together, and I might have a second Star Trek nonfiction book to do.
Cool.
Because that's the other thing that happened this year. Obverse Books, who do this fantastic range of deep dive critical kind of monographs almost on individual Doctor Who stories, have expanded across to Star Trek. And their first wave is, I think, Return of the Archons from the original show. I know one of the Boreth episodes from Next Gen is on deck at some point quite soon. And I've done one on Through the Valley of Shadows from Discovery Season 2. And that was great. I've got the edits on that on deck for next week before I close down for Christmas. And if that works, I've got I have licked another part of Star Trek canon. No one can have this but me for a second wave. So hopefully that will come to pass.
Dibs. Yes, you got the dibs.
Yes.
That's awesome. It's funny because like I actually, as much as I have to schedule everything now in advance because not with the show actually. I do the show kind of by the seat of my pants a lot of the time. But with my books, you say the year's full. I'm like, yeah, my year looks pretty full too next year.
Isn't it a great experience?
I'm swamped. It's cool. I mean, like, but it's all just me. I mean, it's my own doing in this case, and I don't have as in you're doing it. You go out there and audition. Like nobody tells me no ever because I'm the only one who does it. I don't ask for that because I don't need to. It's just me. The only one who needs to know what I'm doing is me. But that said, I actually toned down the plans for next year a little bit from what I normally try to do, which is, that's the thing, because I'm a grandiose planner and I only have so much power. even with the CPAP and the vitamin D and all this stuff, with my brain chemistry at firing is like, I don't think I should try to do 12 novels a year. That's a lot.
It's a fair bit, yeah.
Well, but though it's funny. The funny thing about that though is I say that's a lot, but then I go and I schedule 8 books, but also 10 serials to run at the same time, and then it suddenly looks like I'm doing 18 books in a year potentially, or maybe more, which is maybe a little insane. But it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Because each of the 10 of the serials only comes out with 1 chapter a week. It's just by the end of the year they'll each probably be a novel or more. And that's it's kind of what I always wanted to do, and it really serves my ADHD. So it's great. It's like because I can bounce between stories. I do two episodes a day in different stories. And then I write my main book in the afternoon. It's working a little bit. I mean, it'd work better if I didn't fall behind so much and start like saying like, I don't want to do it today, and then I have to do 5 episodes on Friday, which is what I did this week. Which was madness, but I got it done crazily.
That's ultimately that's all that matters. If you bring it into land, you bring it into land. You know. Yes,
got that bacon. Returned to home with it. You know.
Exactly.
So anyway, we are pushing up against our regular time, but I want to hold on a little longer because this is we barely got started. Honestly, is what it feels like to me.
That's fine. Go ahead.
As long this show isn't over till I say it's over. So anyway, the year 2021, we are going out with a bang. So anyway, I want to ask you what you've been. I mean, we know a lot about what you're making lately, what sort of stuff you're doing creatively. But what have you been reading or listening to lately? Yeah,
this is perfect timing because I'm actually a good chunk of the way through. I've just finished something really cool, and I'm a good chunk of the way through a couple of others. I just finished Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao, which is amazing. It is a retelling of the story of China's only empress, reimagined in a world where the amount of chi you can generate dictates whether or not you have kind of a normal pedestrian life or whether you're trained to pilot a chrysalis. Chrysalises are this universe's version of Jaegers or mecha, which are literally the hollowed out, resculpted corpses of colossal metallic aliens called Hundans, who have spent centuries attacking mankind. And the main character has very, very good reasons for wanting to be picked. And there's a very specific person she wants to murder. And she knows full well that when she does murder this person, her whole life is going to come to an end, but it will be worth it. She successfully murders this person. This is a very minor spoiler. Around page 75. It is a 400-page book.
So her life doesn't exactly end at that point, then, I would guess.
Oh, good Lord, no. It is so freaking good. It's a fascinating, different approach to a myth. It hits a lot of buttons that a lot of the kind of Asian continent dramas, which are really popular on Netflix, hit. It's a fantastic giant robots beating the shit out of things novel. And it has with my kind of pop culture analyst head on, there are 2 endings which always really annoy me. And the first is the one which obviously sets up a sequel. And the second is the type of ending that can be best summed up by the phrase, or is it? And This is both a very definitive ending and an or is it ending, and it lands perfectly. The last page of this book genuinely made me go, "Oh shit," which is a really beautiful time to leave something on. So yeah, in kind of reading terms, I've been really enjoying that. I got a stack of comics I finally picked up a couple of days ago, and I'm looking forward to digging into some of those. I made a start with Mark Penman and John Repian's excellent adaptation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is all done in 3 colors. It's white, green, and red. And John has kept, and I think modified in some very interesting and subtle ways, the rhyme scheme. And the rhyme scheme for Gawain and the Green Knight is not the traditional poetry one. It's actually front-loaded, where the rhyming and the rhythm comes from syllabic repetition. So a line will start with, "First forests flamed," or something similar to that. You just get this kind of really high angle of attack, and it gives it a really unique feel, and it's accessible and fun. And it's got a great essay about the history and evolution of the poem in the back. So that was a really good time. And in terms of what I'm listening to, I keep circling back to I think it's called "You're a Man Now, Boy," and it's an album by Rolly Ritchie. And Ritchie is the musical alter ego of a guy called Jacob Anderson, who a surprising amount of your listeners will probably have heard of. Jacob Anderson was best known for a long time in Game of Thrones as Grey Worm. And he's just finished an absolutely barnstorming run in the most recent season of Doctor Who over here as a character called Inston V. Vander. And he is one of those actors that it's very difficult to look away from because he's very calm. He's one of those kind of very focused presences in the scene. It's a little like Keanu Reeves, that thing where you will look at him when he's not doing anything. And his plot line in this most recent season of Doctor Who with another superb performer called Thadia Graham was so freaking good and so sweet. And I've been meaning to check out his music for a little while, and it has not disappointed. And it's all over the place. There's elements of rock, there's elements of rap, there's elements of confessional to it almost. It's very wry, and it's very funny, and it's very lyrically based, and that's been on pretty regular rotation.
Oh, that sounds awesome, man! I got to check that out.
Really good.
I mean, I'm normally such a heavy music guy. I've been checking out more rap and stuff, and I mean, I love my rock music, but there's room for variety and everything. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny though, because you mentioned, because that sounds like cutting edge in a way, like new stuff, right? And my main pick, though, I want to say one other thing about that book you mentioned. I forget the title already, but the book,
Iron Widow.
Iron Widow. It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it also made me a little uncomfortable because I'm like, wait a minute, I have giant monsters turned into mechs in one of my series. It sounds very different, but yeah, it's like these giant kaiju mech guys or kaiju like machines are attacking humanity, and then they get turned into mechs when they're destroyed. Oh, okay. That sounds familiar. Where have I seen that one before? And that would be in the Twisted God series, so there's the pimpage there. Anyway, if you want more of that stuff, if you read Iron Widow and you're like, I want more mechs that used to be hostile giants, here, go for it. You can find them there. And mine's steampunk too. I don't know if this one's more sci-fi and mine's like a steampunk fantasy.
Full-on anime sci-fi.
So. Okay, great. Okay, that sounds incredible. And actually, you couldn't have pitched it better to me. I don't know about because I love myself some anime sci-fi. But anyway, that sounds incredible. And the album, that album sounds great. I mean, honestly, it all sounds fantastic. So I will definitely have to look into some of that stuff, to be honest. I always say that, and I have so little time because I'm such a horrendous super nerd that I have other things on my plate at all times. And I mean, I'm still reading, as for my reading, I'm still reading Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. Maybe I'll be done by the time this episode drops, but I'm way behind I'm way ahead on episodes. So it's still the same episode as last week. Last time I mentioned it, I'm still reading that book. I got past the part that made me pass out the first time I tried reading it. So that's good.
Paul. That's good news.
And so it's funny because actually that's the other thing about the other piece of work I'm reading, and I also really love the prose in this book. It's phenomenal. If I had it next to me, well, I do have my phone, but we're not pulling that out because I don't have enough time. I would totally want to read some stuff from it because she's just a wordsmith. She's amazing, and I need to read more of her work. I just I have this one. I need to keep tackling it. And again, reading on my phone has really made it possible because I'm like, oh, that's too much for me. Flip. And I get to the next page. Yeah. And that's how I read a lot of the time, This year I learned that treating books like toys is kind of my style. I want to be able to move back and forth in them. I'm not a linear reader. I move in a circle.
Nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. I mean, and strangely, it was one of my English professors who told me that a few years ago. It's like, yeah, if you don't like something in a book, just skip it. If you're getting bored, skip.
Yep.
And I mean, eventually, if I skip too much, eventually I'm like, well, I'm skipping this book. But if I love most of it, and I'm like, some of these parts are too brutal for me, which happens actually more than you might think, given my predilection for war games and fantasy that might be sometimes pretty dark. And heavy metal, especially. But sometimes it's like, that's a little much. And so I have to just kind of skirt that stuff. But that kind of brings me to that's kind of my last pick of the year. And that is The Bedlam and Goliath by the Mars Volta, which it came out 13 years ago now, or maybe 14. Because the songs on it debuted. I learned this year because I got kind of obsessed with the album. They debuted at a New Year's Eve show between 2007 and 2008. So it was midnight, wow. And the ball is dropping, and they're playing. They're on stage, and that just sounds like a crazy show, especially because the Mars Volta is crazy. They're improvisational progressive rock in their live shows, and they've got this heavy metal element that is bizarre. I don't know how to put it. Any other way to put it? It's unique. They have a sound unlike any other metal band I've ever heard, though it does sometimes resemble like Rush or Coheed and Cambria. And they have this, but I don't know, man. I can't even describe it. But it is a ghost story. This album is a ghost story that features a Ouija board with 3 souls trapped in it, and it's bizarre. And those souls don't like each other either, by the way. I mean, it's one of those semi-autobiographical tales, this album, I believe, because, I mean, obviously fictionalized because the ghost does talk to them and give them weird insights on the past. But it's about a band that finds this Ouija board that's haunted, I think. Maybe. It's also a hard album to follow. So anyway.
That sounds really cool.
It is really cool, and again, this is another one. It actually reminds me a lot, not only because it came out approximately the same time frame as Who Fears Death, and I read it about the same time. I started reading Who Fears Death about the same time I got into the Mars Volta. But I had been off this sauce for a while, let me put it that way, because they're a challenging band in some ways too. I mean, I say challenge because there's really dark lyrics, there's really weird lyrics, and there's also the parts where you can basically not understand what the guy's saying because he's gone super high-pitched, as you do in metal. Anyway, good stuff for all. Or at least for those who like visceral horror stories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking to the man himself right now. I mean, he likes his horror stories. Go check out Pseudopod, But, anyway, we're about out of time. Really out of time now. I'm late, actually. So, Al, where can people find your stuff online?
You can find me on Twitter at Alasdair Stuart. You can find me on the web at alasdairstuart.com. And start with alasdairstuart.com. Pretty much everything's findable from there.
Yeah, hell yeah. So you can also find my books on timniederwriter.com/books, and we're changing it up because you can also find this show at mentalcellularpublications.com. All the episodes will be there. And and then there's one last thing. It's the same site, so you can find links to everywhere from there. But I want to mention it if you're in the United States and soon perhaps worldwide. TimNiederwriter.com/serialized-stories is serial-fiction. Whatever. I need to remember this better. But anyway, the serials under you can find on my website the serial stories. There's 10 of them. They're all sci-fi or fantasy. You'll find something you like there. It's but again, only available in the United States as far as I know right now. But they say there might be a rollout in the near future worldwide, and that would be madness.
That would be very cool.
I'm excited to see that when it happens. But that's for next year. So, folks, Stay safe out there. Have a happy New Year and happy holidays. Take it easy, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon. Yeah, thanks again, Alasdair. Sorry, that was awesome. And yeah, let's talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye.